Tonight's Fallon episode spiraled into chaos when an off-script accusation from Jimmy triggered an explosive confrontation with Donald Trump. What began as late-night banter unraveled into an unfiltered clash, ending with Trump storming offstage in fury. The studio lights buzzed hotter than usual as the cameras rolled on what was meant to be just another unpredictable but humorous segment of The Tonight Show. The crowd, half in awe and half unsure if they were allowed to laugh, leaned forward as Jimmy Fallon greeted his guest, none other than former President Donald J. Trump. Known for his unpredictable temper and Fallon's often dangerously cheeky style, the combination was already teetering on the edge of combustibility. But nobody, not even Fallon himself, seemed to realize just how fast things were about to go up in flames. The audience applauded as Trump settled into the plush guest chair, nodding and offering his signature smug grin. Jimmy opened with his usual mix of charm and sarcasm, poking at Trump's hair, political legacy, and golf game. So far, nothing unusual. The crowd chuckled. Trump smirked through it, clearly expecting the usual roast. But somewhere between rehearsed jabs and spontaneous riffs, Fallon veered off script. With a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, he pivoted to what he called a rumor too wild to ignore. Then, with a wink to the audience and no warning, he tossed a verbal grenade, a claim that Trump's marriage to Melania had been quietly restructured into a PR agreement, allegedly involving a secret non-disclosure pact renewed annually. And worse, a clause that allowed her to live in a different wing of Mar-a-Lago with a rumored companion. The crowd froze. Some gasped, others nervously laughed, unsure if this was part of the bit. Trump's face stiffened, his jaw clenched in real time. For a second, the room held its breath. Trump's expression changed from amusement to venom in a blink. The host's grin began to falter. This wasn't just a crossed line. Fallon had stepped into a minefield. Trump didn't yell. Not at first. His rebuttal came sharp, cold, and scalpel precise. He shifted in his seat, eyes narrowing, tearing into Fallon's credibility with surgical cruelty. He mocked Fallon's plummeting ratings, accused him of desperation, and hinted at personal habits behind the scenes that allegedly had NBC execs on edge for months. The audience, no longer sure if this was satire, recoiled slightly. The tension was now so thick it was practically visible, like smoke curling off a fuse. Rather than de-escalate, Fallon doubled down. He tried to recover with a sarcastic follow-up, questioning the authenticity of Trump's family appearances and implying they were contractual cameos. It was clumsy, a bit too mean-spirited, and visibly forced. Something in Trump snapped. He leaned forward, visibly shaking with restrained rage, unleashing a blistering takedown that felt rehearsed, as if he had long waited for a chance to go scorched earth. He mocked Fallon's infamous 2016 hair tousle incident, not just for its awkwardness, but for how Fallon had tried to walk it back in later interviews, calling him spineless and branding him a network puppet. But Trump wasn't done. He launched into what felt like an unfiltered monologue about Hollywood hypocrisy, late-night double standards, and Fallon's alleged behind-the-scenes behavior, referencing cryptic backstage breakdowns and implying substance-fueled meltdowns. Hushed by network execs, the studio audience now sat stunned, part of them horrified, part of them captivated. Fallon, red-faced and visibly rattled, tried to salvage control of the interview, but the power had shifted. Trump had turned the tables. The guest was now in full command, the host cornered on his own stage. Fallon attempted to pivot back to humor, making a weak joke about not being able to afford therapy this week, but the momentum had already moved irreversibly out of his hands. Then came the final insult. Trump rose from his seat mid-sentence. The cameras, unsure whether to cut or stay live, continued rolling. With one last glance at Fallon, something between a smirk and a death stare, Trump pointed toward the crowd, saying something too quiet for the mics but loaded with disdain. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to clap, boo, or just sit frozen. And then, without so much as a handshake, Trump walked off the stage. Live, mid-show. No commercial break, just tension. Raw and exposed. Fallon sat in stunned silence, blinking at the cameras. The band didn't play. The teleprompter was blank. No one moved. And somewhere off stage, security scrambled as producers argued in hushed tones over whether to cut to a rerun or let the chaos continue unfiltered. What none of them knew was that the aftermath had only just begun. Because within minutes, Trump's team was already flooding social media with clips, tweets, behind-the-scenes audio, even blurry backstage footage, all coordinated. And with each post, the narrative shifted further out of Fallon's hands. But one question still loomed over everyone watching that night. What had Fallon really heard about the Trumps that made him risk going nuclear on live TV? That question ignited a wildfire the moment Trump stormed off stage. The internet exploded before the show had even finished airing on the West Coast. Twitter was ablaze with grainy fan-recorded videos and hastily clipped segments of Fallon's smirking jab and Trump's explosive departure. But while the public dissected what was said on camera, behind the scenes, NBC was in total meltdown. Fallon's dressing room door slammed shut behind him as his producer, Lila Green, stormed in. Phone in one hand, fury in her eyes. Executives were already on damage control, but Lila wasn't concerned about that. Not yet. She wanted to know one thing: why he'd done it. Why he detonated a hand grenade in the middle of an already volatile interview. And Jimmy, sitting, hunched over in the chair by his dressing table, just muttered something she didn't quite catch. Then he said it again. He hadn't made it up. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't improv. The accusation, the thing about the NDA, the separate wing, the rumored companion, it was all from a source. One Fallon trusted implicitly. Weeks earlier, a senior producer from a rival network had whispered something after a late-night Emmy after-party. Something about Melania being spotted entering a luxury suite in Geneva with a man who was not her husband, and Trump's legal team flying in less than 24 hours later to shut down the hotel's surveillance system and pay off witnesses. The story had never seen daylight. Fallon hadn't even believed it at first, but then other whispers began surfacing, from makeup artists, staffers, even someone from Trump's own security detail. It was unverified, too messy, too risky. But now it was out. Fallon had kept it buried, until tonight. Something about Trump's smugness, the thinly veiled contempt he showed when Fallon made jokes, like the whole show was beneath him, had pushed Jimmy to the edge. He wasn't just poking fun anymore. He wanted to humiliate him, the way Trump humiliated others. And now it had spiraled out of control. While Fallon reeled, Trump was already mobilizing. His team flooded social media with doctored clips that made Fallon appear erratic, edited to imply the host had been drinking before the show, or worse. A shaky video surfaced of Fallon slurring a line in the pre-show warm-up, but what viewers didn't see was that it was a glitch in the teleprompter. Context didn't matter. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. By midnight, Fox News had already aired a special segment, Fallon's Meltdown, Liberal Late Night Unmasked. With every passing hour, Fallon's reputation took another hit. Commentators, influencers, and rival hosts weighed in, some laughing it off, others horrified by what they saw as a grotesque lapse in professionalism. Fallon's name trended globally, but not in the way anyone on the PR team wanted. Backstage at NBC, meetings ran into the early morning. There were whispers Fallon might be suspended. Others suggested he issue a public apology. But Fallon refused. For the first time in his career, he felt like he had peeled back a mask. Not just Trump's, but the show's. The manufactured civility, the toothless jokes, the political neutrality that had kept The Tonight Show afloat while every other host took sides. He had crossed a line, yes, but maybe, he thought, it was one that needed to be crossed. By dawn, a new bombshell emerged. A leaked memo, anonymously posted to a fringe news forum and quickly picked up by Reddit, appeared to confirm the existence of a marriage clause between Trump and Melania, including an annual NDA renewal and restrictions on public appearances. The document was unsigned, unverified, but disturbingly specific. Fallon wasn't vindicated, but he wasn't alone in the fire anymore. Trump, predictably, called it all fake news, branding Fallon a coked-up clown in an early morning Truth Social tirade. He claimed NBC was collapsing, that Fallon was moments from being fired, and that Melania was preparing legal action. But insiders knew better. Trump was furious not just because the accusation had gone public, but because it had stuck. The crack in his carefully maintained image of family loyalty had begun to widen. That afternoon, Fallon received an unmarked envelope at the studio. No return address. Inside, a single photo. A grainy, zoomed-in snapshot of Melania stepping out of a black SUV in Geneva beside a man in a gray tailored coat. The date and time were scrawled on the back. No name, no note. Just the image. He didn't know who sent it, but it confirmed what he feared. Trump wasn't just embarrassed. He was exposed. And if Fallon went public with this, the entire Trump media machine would mobilize to destroy him, not just professionally, but personally. Fallon was no fool. He knew the machine. He'd seen what happened to whistleblowers, to comedians who went too far, to anyone who pulled back the curtain. But the studio was already in chaos. The network was split. Some higher-ups saw Fallon as reckless, others quietly admired the ratings spike. He was trending, he was talked about, he was relevant again. But as the hours passed, it became clear. Trump wasn't finished. A call came in late that night. It wasn't official, just a warning from someone Fallon had worked with during the Apprentice crossover promos a decade earlier. The message was blunt. Trump had dirt, real dirt, not jokes, not rumors. And if Fallon pushed this further, the retaliation would be nuclear. Fallon stared at the photo again. Melania, Geneva. The date matched the night of the rumored NDA renewal. His heart raced, but his resolve hardened. This wasn't about ratings anymore. This was about truth. But before he could even plan a next move, another shockwave hit. This time from within his own walls. A crew member, someone who'd worked makeup for Trump during the show, went public with a secret recording. Trump, backstage, before the show, ranting about Melania, about the NDA, about making it look real one more year. The audio was scratchy but unmistakable, and it was about to go viral. The audio leaked like gasoline on dry brush, and the media, already on fire from last night's fallout, lit the match without hesitation. Less than an hour after the anonymous upload, it had been clipped, captioned, and dissected by every major outlet. The clip wasn't long, maybe 30 seconds, but its implications thundered through every screen and headline in the country. In it, Trump's voice, unmistakably. His word it vented to someone off camera. The words were sharp, laced with bitterness and contempt. Complaints about rehearsing the family act again, irritation at renewing the contract, and a sarcastic jab about smiling for photos when she won't even speak to me unless the lawyers tell her to. It was raw, unfiltered, and damning. The authenticity was confirmed within hours by forensic audio experts. The recording was real. What followed was a media bloodbath. Melania's spokesperson immediately released a vague statement condemning violations of privacy, but pointedly didn't deny the substance of the leak. Rumors about her separate living arrangement, long whispered in D.C. circles, surged into mainstream conversation. Fox News hesitated at first, but even they couldn't ignore the firestorm. CNN ran the clip on loop. Late-night hosts who had once danced around Trump now went for the jugular. And in the eye of the hurricane sat Jimmy Fallon, shaken, scorched, but suddenly more powerful than he had been in years. He was no longer the affable late-night court jester. He was the man who drew blood. NBC's initial panic turned into strategy. A primetime special was rushed into development. Fallon, Unfiltered, would air within the week. Executives, always allergic to controversy until they saw ratings spike, pivoted their tone. Fallon had sparked a national conversation. He was fearless. The show's viewership, which had been quietly waning for over a year, was now higher than it had been since 2016. But Fallon wasn't celebrating. The storm he unleashed wasn't just on screen. It bled into his personal life. Protesters gathered outside 30 Rock, some supporting him, others denouncing him. His inbox was flooded with death threats and anonymous praise in equal measure. Friends warned him to hire security. His wife asked if they should take the kids out of the city for a while. Fallon, for the first time in his career, wasn't sure if he'd gone too far, or not far enough. Trump, meanwhile, had gone dark. For 2 days, there were no statements, no rallies, not even posts on Truth Social. It was the loudest silence anyone had ever heard from the former president. His inner circle scrambled. Lawyers, PR fixers, even Melania's team, which now operated with quiet independence, scrambled to assess the damage. On the third day, he emerged, but not on television, not at a press conference. He went live on his own platform, a full 40-minute video, seated behind a desk at Mar-a-Lago, lit like a wartime broadcast. It was angry, rambling. He accused Fallon of being part of a deep state media plot. He claimed the audio was fake, despite expert analysis. He invoked Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton, and even Oprah. And finally, he tried to pivot the conversation by saying Melania had always been private, and that Fallon's comments were an attack not on him, but on a mother, a wife, and a great first lady. But it didn't land. The public had seen too much, heard too much. Fallon, once seen as soft, had unexpectedly emerged as the one who'd pierced the armor. Yet even then, he knew it wouldn't be enough just to ride the wave. He had to close it, end it, not with more jabs, but with something undeniable. So he did the unthinkable. He invited Melania, privately. No press, no announcement. Through mutual connections, a former Vogue editor who had once worked closely with her, Fallon's team sent a message. One night, one conversation. No cameras, no pre-interview questions. Just a meeting. Just the truth. To everyone's disbelief, she agreed. They met in a private room on the 44th floor of a midtown hotel. Fallon arrived early. No entourage, just a nervous energy that buzzed in his chest. Melania entered 15 minutes later, guarded, poised, but without her usual wall of handlers. They talked. For over 2 hours, no recording, no leaks, no one outside the room knew what was said. But something shifted. Fallon returned from that meeting not triumphant, not smug, but quiet, reflective. He canceled the primetime special. He asked NBC to air a different kind of follow-up, a monologue. Just him, alone on stage. When he stepped out in front of the audience that night, it wasn't the usual grinning host. It was Fallon, stripped down. He spoke about the nature of truth, about power, performance, and the masks people wear. He admitted to his own complicity in feeding spectacle. He admitted to going too far. But he also stood by what happened. Not out of spite, but out of principle. He didn't reveal what was said in that private meeting, but one thing was clear. He wasn't afraid anymore. The audience didn't erupt into applause. They sat in silence. Respectful, moved. When the show ended, there were no viral bits, No celebrity games. Just truth. And somehow, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Trump's media team tried to spin the chaos as a coordinated smear. Lawsuits were threatened, though few materialized. Melania's silence persisted. She stopped appearing at events entirely. Rumors spread of an impending separation, but nothing was confirmed. Trump's 2024 campaign, already erratic, lost key donors in the fallout. As for Fallon, he didn't become a crusader. He didn't pivot his show into political commentary or double down on confrontation. He just returned. Sharper, more grounded. Still funny, but no longer hiding behind safe jokes. And the audience followed him, because they had seen something real. Something rare. They had watched a man stand in the fire and walk out of it changed.